Few figures in modern history are as iconic or as complex as Winston Churchill. A man of extraordinary talents, contradictions, and a will of iron, Churchill's legacy stretches across 2 world wars, the fall of empires, and the dawn of the nuclear age. Known for his indomitable spirit during Britain's darkest hour, Churchill's story is more than just one of military heroism. It's a tale of triumph and tragedy, political ascent and public defeat, moral certainty and questionable decisions. Today, we explore the full arc of Winston Churchill's life, from his aristocratic origins to his towering role in world affairs. Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill was born on November 30th, 1874, into the upper echelons of British society. The Churchill family's prestige was unmatched, tracing their lineage to the Duke of Marlborough, one of England's greatest military commanders. Raised in the grandeur of Blenheim Palace, it might have seemed like young Winston was destined for greatness. But his childhood was anything but easy. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was a charismatic, brilliant, yet volatile figure in British politics. Randolph's meteoric rise and sudden fall from grace in the political world would have a lasting effect on Winston. Winston adored his father, though he often felt neglected by him. Randolph was critical, expecting great things from his son while offering little encouragement. His mother, Jenny Jerome, was a striking beauty and a prominent socialite. Born in Brooklyn, New York, she brought American energy to the rigid British aristocracy. Although largely absent during Winston's youth, Jenny played a key role in facilitating his early career, using her high society connections to open doors in politics and the military. Churchill's formative years were defined by a sense of isolation. Sent to harsh boarding schools, such as St. George's School in Ascot, at the age of 7, he struggled with both academic subjects and personal relationships. At Harrow School, he was often near the bottom of his class and suffered from a stutter and lisp. His headstrong and rebellious nature set him apart from his peers. Despite these challenges, Harrow would become the place where Churchill's love for history and the English language would begin to flourish. One of Churchill's few joys during this time was his passion for reading and writing. Inspired by tales of military adventure and classical heroes, he nurtured an ambition to make his mark on the world through courageous deeds. His nanny, Elizabeth Everest, was a more stable maternal figure than his own mother, and Winston often turned to her for comfort. In his later years, he credited her with giving him the affection and guidance he lacked from his parents. After struggling academically, Churchill made a strategic decision to pursue a military career, applying to the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. His tenacity in overcoming initial failures, he took the entrance exam 3 times, was an early sign of the resolve that would characterize his later life. Once admitted, Churchill thrived in the military environment. His graduation, 8th in his class, was a turning point. Here, he not only learned military strategy and leadership, but also gained confidence in himself and his abilities. This period was crucial in shaping Churchill's belief that persistence in the face of adversity was the key to success. In 1895, at the age of 21, Churchill embarked on a military career that would take him across the British Empire, from Cuba to India to Africa. But it wasn't just military action that defined these years. It was the beginning of his journey as a writer, a public figure, and an ambitious politician. Churchill's first posting was with the 4th Queen's Own Hussars, stationed in India. Here, far from the political intrigues of London, he spent his time reading, studying, and sharpening his views on the British Empire. His experiences in India would influence his later foreign policy, and he developed an early fascination with the mechanics of imperial power. In 1898, Churchill volunteered to join Lord Kitchener's campaign in Sudan, where he fought in the Battle of Omdurman, one of the last cavalry charges in British military history. His bravery was noted, but so was his willingness to criticize military leadership. This battle formed the basis for one of his first books, The River War, 1899, a critical analysis of British imperialism and military tactics. In 1899, Churchill left the army to pursue a career as a war correspondent. His work in the Boer War would catapult him into national prominence. Sent to South Africa to cover the conflict, Churchill was captured by Boer forces. His dramatic escape from a prison camp, which he chronicled in articles and books, transformed him into a public hero almost overnight. This period also showcased Churchill's innate talent for self-promotion. His escape was widely publicized in British newspapers, and the adventure set the stage for his entry into politics. Churchill's escape from Boer captivity was nothing short of daring. He climbed over a latrine wall, trekked hundreds of miles across enemy territory, and hid in a coal mine for days before finally reaching safety. His face appeared on the front pages of newspapers across Britain, and he was hailed as a national hero. In 1900, Churchill was elected to Parliament as a Conservative MP for Oldham, marking the beginning of his 64-year political career. However, Churchill's early years in Parliament were not smooth. He was often seen as arrogant, overly ambitious, and quick to alienate his colleagues. In 1904, in a dramatic move, Churchill crossed the floor and joined the Liberal Party, a decision driven by his support for free trade and his opposition to conservative protectionist policies. This controversial shift reinforced Churchill's reputation as a political opportunist, but also a man of principle. When Churchill returned to the forefront of British politics in 1940, the world was on the brink of collapse. Hitler's forces had swept across Europe, and Britain stood alone, its very survival at stake. Churchill, who had long warned of the Nazi threat, was now in the unenviable position of leading the nation through its darkest hour. On May 10, 1940, following the resignation of Neville Chamberlain, Churchill was appointed Prime Minister of a nation in crisis. The situation was dire. France was on the verge of surrender, and the British Expeditionary Force had been forced to retreat to Dunkirk. Churchill's first days in office were marked by uncertainty and fear. Despite his past failures, particularly his involvement in the disastrous Gallipoli campaign during World War I, he seized the moment with unparalleled energy and determination. His first speech as Prime Minister set the tone for the years to come. "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat," he declared to the House of Commons, a rallying cry that stiffened the nation's resolve. As Britain faced the possibility of invasion, Churchill's leadership was characterized by his refusal to negotiate with Hitler. Many within the British government, including members of his own cabinet, considered peace talks with Germany. Churchill rejected this outright, convinced that any form of appeasement would lead to the destruction of Britain. The Dunkirk evacuation in June 1940, where over 300,000 Allied soldiers were rescued from the beaches of northern France, was a significant turning point. Though Churchill refused to paint the retreat as a victory, he used the event to galvanize public support, famously declaring, "We shall never surrender. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender." The summer of 1940 saw one of Churchill's greatest tests, the Battle of Britain. With the Luftwaffe launching relentless bombing raids over British cities, Churchill's defiance became legendary. His daily speeches and radio broadcasts during the Blitz helped maintain morale, even as London and other cities were ravaged by air raids. Churchill's leadership during these dark months inspired a global admiration. His speeches, filled with vivid language and unwavering confidence, made him a symbol of resistance, not just for Britain but for the entire free world. Churchill himself refused to seek shelter during air raids, often standing on rooftops or in the streets to watch the bombs fall. His courage in the face of danger made him an almost mythic figure to the British people. Churchill's relationships with Franklin D. Roosevelt and Joseph Stalin defined the Allied strategy against the Axis powers. Despite their vastly different political ideologies, Churchill's ability to form the Big Three alliance was key to the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. However, by the end of the war in 1945, the landscape had shifted. Churchill's popularity at home was not enough to secure his re-election. He was voted out of office in July 1945, a political defeat that surprised many, though Churchill himself remained defiant. Though he was voted out of office in 1945, Winston Churchill's influence on world affairs was far from over. His second term as Prime Minister, his contributions to literature, and his legacy as a Cold War statesman would ensure that his name would endure long after his death. In 1951, Churchill made a remarkable political comeback, becoming Prime Minister again at the age of 77. His second term was less focused on war and more on the growing tensions of the Cold War. In his famous 1946 Iron Curtain speech, Churchill was one of the first to publicly warn about the Soviet threat, coining a term that would define global politics for decades to come. Churchill's later years were marked by his growing concern over the possibility of nuclear conflict. Despite his reputation as a wartime leader, he was an advocate for diplomacy and sought to ease tensions between the West and the Soviet Union. By 1955, declining health forced Churchill to retire from frontline politics. However, he remained an influential figure behind the scenes, offering counsel to his successors and continuing to shape British and global policy. In 1953, Churchill was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, not for his wartime leadership, but for his historical writings. His six-volume history of the Second World War cemented his reputation as one of the great chroniclers of modern history. Churchill's later years were spent at Chartwell, his beloved country estate, where he continued to write, paint, and reflect on his life. His health deteriorated in the 1960s, and he suffered a series of strokes. Despite this, his place in British history was already assured. On January 24, 1965, Churchill passed away at the age of 90. His state funeral, attended by leaders from around the world, marked the end of an era. The nation that he had led through its darkest hours paid tribute to the man who had once promised nothing but blood, toil, tears, and sweat, and delivered victory. Winston Churchill's legacy is a testament to resilience, leadership, and the ability to inspire a nation when all seemed lost. His triumphs as a wartime leader, his controversial decisions as a politician, and his eloquence as a writer have left an indelible mark on the world. Churchill was not a perfect man, but his life, filled with extraordinary highs and devastating lows, stands as a testament to the complexity of leadership in times of crisis. As we reflect on the man who once said, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts," we are reminded that history often hinges on the resolve of individuals.